Snow fell in delicate flurries as I pulled my faded Prius into the long, crowded driveway of my parents' home in Newton. The house was glowing with warm Christmas lights, but the warmth didn't quite reach me. SUVs and luxury sedans lined the driveway like a dealership lot. Lauren's gleaming white Range Rover sat front and center, practically a monument to everything she wanted the world to believe about her. I sat for a moment watching the soft light through the frosted windows, then grabbed my overnight bag from the back seat. As I reached the front steps, the door swung open. "Oh, you actually came," Lauren said. Eyebrows raised, voice dipped in sugar. "Merry Christmas to you too," I replied. Stepping inside, the scent of cinnamon pine and roasted turkey filled the air so familiar it almost hurt. The house was already packed. Uncles, cousins, people I barely recognized, filled the living room in red sweaters and glittering earrings. The fireplace crackled behind the massive tree, dripping in designer ornaments. My mother glanced at me over her shoulder. "You're late," she said, barely pausing in her placement of hors d'oeuvres. "And couldn't you have dressed up a little?" "It's Christmas." I looked down at my outfit. Simple black sweater, tailored wool trousers. Understated, yes, but more expensive than Lauren's rhinestone-studded designer knockoff. Not that anyone would notice, I made sure the tag stayed hidden. Just like everything else I'd built. Lauren tossed her hair and adjusted the sleeves of her velvet blazer. "So," she said, drawing the word out like a weapon, "small issue with sleeping arrangements. The guest rooms are all full." I didn't flinch. "Where am I supposed to sleep? Cousin Hannah's got the pink room." She just had the baby mom chimed in without looking up. "And the Wilsons are in the upstairs suite. They're flying back tomorrow and needed somewhere close to the airport." I nodded slowly. Already sensing the setup, Lauren smiled like a cat that had caught the canary. "We made up a space in the garage. There's a cot and a heater. Should be fine." The room quieted just enough for everyone to hear. I felt the eyes. The unspoken judgment. The familiar script. "The garage?" I asked evenly. "In December." "Oh, don't be dramatic," Mom said. "It's not like you're not used to modest accommodations." I smiled, faintly tightened my grip on my bag, and said, "It's fine. The garage is just fine." The garage was colder than I expected. A small space heater buzzed weakly in the corner, struggling against the December air that seeped through the cracks in the door. They'd cleared just enough space between Dad's golf clubs and a leaning tower of old Christmas decorations to fit a rusty military cot and a folding chair. A thin blanket lay folded at one end, clearly snatched from the back of a forgotten linen closet. "Dinner's at 7, Lauren said with theatrical cheer, standing at the threshold in her velvet heels. "Try not to track any garage dust into the house when you come in." The door shut behind her before I could answer. I set my bag down and sat on the cot. The springs creaked beneath me. A snow globe on the nearby shelf caught my eye inside a tiny porcelain family smiled in front of a fireplace forever frozen in time. I pulled out my phone. 3 unread emails blinked on the lock screen, all marked urgent, one from our legal team, one from the CFO, and one from my assistant confirming the agenda for tomorrow's emergency board session. The same session where Lauren's boss, Mr. Jensen, would be presenting projections to a boardroom full of shareholders, still oblivious to the fact that the woman he'd been trying to meet for over a month was currently sitting on a cot in a garage, under a wreath made of tinsel and regret. I tapped out a quick response to the CFO. "We'll address the Richardson numbers in the second half. Have the documents ready for immediate vote." Then to my assistant, move Mr. Jensen's department report to the top of the agenda. "And no, he still doesn't get a pre-call. Let him wait." I leaned back slightly, absorbing the absurdity of the moment. A few feet away, Dad's old putting mat lay rolled in the corner, half covered in pine-scented storage boxes labeled Xmas 2015. Above me, a string of lights flickered, hanging crookedly from the garage rafters. They thought they'd put me in my place. They just didn't realize I'd spent years building the place. While Lauren was counting titles and scrambling for middle management promotions, I was restructuring global portfolios and consolidating power in silence. No interviews, no photo ops, just results. The heater rattled again, then went still for a moment before humming back to life. I reached for the extra sweater tucked in my bag cashmere from a small designer in Paris and pulled it on. Outside, the wind howled lightly through the trees. Inside, I opened another file, this one containing the operational review Lauren had signed off on last quarter. Numbers don't lie, and these were already bleeding. I tapped the edge of the cot with my fingers, rhythmically, thoughtfully. Then I smiled. Let them sip wine and make toast. Tomorrow they'd learn who really signed their checks. At exactly 7 p.m., I stepped into the dining room, the air thick with the scent of roasted turkey and ambition. The long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier, set with polished silverware and crystal glasses. I walked past laughing relatives and settled quietly into the seat, farthest from the head of the table. My place as always. Lauren, wrapped in deep emerald satin, sat proudly near the front beside Mr. Jensen. Her voice rang out louder than necessary as she leaned in, her perfectly curled hair brushing his sleeve. So when the board saw my proposal, they knew I was ready. VP of Operations as of January. She beamed. I mean, it's not official until after the holidays, but it's basically a done deal. Mr. Jensen, all flushed cheeks and polite smiles, nodded approvingly. Well, Summit Enterprises must be thrilled. They've been pushing for innovation lately, and you seem like the kind of leader who gets things done. I picked up my wine glass and sipped slowly to hide the curve of my mouth. Oh, absolutely, Lauren said, clearly energized by the praise. Ever since Summit acquired our firm, everyone's been walking on eggshells. No one knows anything about the new leadership. It's kind of wild, Mr. Jensen chuckled. I heard the CEO's never even been seen in public. Just emails, voice-only meetings. Some say she's based in London, others say Tokyo. I heard she bought a private island, Lauren added, eyes wide with mock awe. Talk about hiding from responsibility. Probably some rich kid who got lucky, Mr. Jensen said, reaching for his wine. Inherited a few million and decided to play businesswoman. I didn't look up. I reached calmly for the breadbasket and passed it along. The secrecy's honestly a bit ridiculous, Lauren continued. Like, who even runs a company like that? At least let us see your face if you're making decisions that affect all of us. The room laughed lightly. A cousin chimed in with something about rich people and eccentric hobbies. Someone toasted to real leadership with a wink toward Lauren. My mother clinked glasses with an uncle and glanced down the table at me, almost as if daring me to say something I didn't. I watched. I listened. I took another slow sip of wine. Outside, the snow had started again, dusting the windows in soft frost. Inside, the heat of the fireplace and the self-congratulation made the room feel thick. Mr. Jensen's phone buzzed just once, barely audible under the chatter. He ignored it. Lauren leaned closer and began describing her plans for restructuring the department in Q1, her voice full of certainty and just a hint of condescension. I tapped my finger lightly against the base of my wine glass. Let them talk. The cracks had already started forming. Mr. Jensen's phone buzzed again, this time, more insistently. He glanced at the screen, and the color drained subtly from his face. Excuse me for just a moment, he said, rising quickly and stepping out into the hallway. The conversation around the table continued, but I heard his voice echo faintly down the corridor. Yes, I know the meeting is crucial, he said, in a hushed but urgent tone. No, I haven't reached her yet. We think she's still in London. Yes, I've checked with everyone. No one at our level has had contact. I took another bite of roasted carrots and tapped a quiet message to my assistant. Move the pre-board call to 8 a.m. Let him sweat a little longer. Lauren was in the middle of holding court again. We had a bloated system, she said. Waving a fork like a wand, I streamlined operations and eliminated redundancy. Saved the company millions. Uncle James nodded admiringly. That's the kind of leadership we need. Action over hesitations, she smiled sweetly. Exactly. I unlocked my phone and pulled up the actual internal report. The one showing how her cuts had dismantled key redundancies, delayed 2 product launches, and cost us $8 million so far. It was still rising. The team had nicknamed it the Lauren Slide in private Slack channels. Rachel, my mother, said, suddenly breaking the flow. How's teaching these days? Still doing community college? I looked up from my plate, just 1 course per semester. Well, good for you, she replied with a patronizing smile. Nice to have something to keep you occupied, Lauren snorted lightly into her wine. Especially with rent going up these days. Laughter rippled around the table. Mr. Jensen reappeared just in time to catch the tail end. Everything all right? Lauren asked, turning her attention back to him. He gave a strained smile. Oh yes, just a quick work thing. You know how it is? Yes. Lauren nodded, smugness returning. Always someone needing something last minute. As if on cue, his phone buzzed again. He checked it and froze, his eyebrows pulled tight. The tension in his jaw was no longer subtle. I need to make another call. I'll be back, he said quickly. Vanishing again, I glanced across the table at Lauren. She looked pleased, mistaking his discomfort for business chaos she wasn't responsible for. She picked up right where she left off, detailing the next phase of her reorganization plan. I've been thinking, she said to Mr. Jensen's wife, who had politely nodded through all of dinner, we could eliminate even more overlap next quarter. Honestly, the old systems were just holding us back. My phone buzzed. A message from the legal department confirming your attendance for tomorrow's board meeting. Final numbers ready. Do you want Jensen to present his section first? I typed back. Yes. Let's hear his interpretation, then we'll show the data. The dining room sparkled with laughter and clinking glasses, the illusion of order, of control, of power, held up by glitter and ignorance. Lauren twirled her fork delicately, unaware that every confident word she spoke was a countdown. One I didn't have to rush. Mr. Jensen returned to the dining room, looking 10 years older than when he'd left it. His tie was slightly askew, and he held his phone like it had personally betrayed him. Emergency pre-board meeting, he said, voice tight. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., all department heads must attend. The clink of cutlery paused mid-air. Lauren blinked. Tomorrow's Christmas, Mr. Jensen didn't look at her. The CEO wants all operational changes reviewed. The room stilled for a beat, then erupted in murmurs. A cousin whispered something behind her wine glass. My mother frowned. Dad looked confused. Only Lauren seemed to process the weight of what had just been said. She can't do that, Lauren said. Who schedules a board meeting on Christmas morning? She doesn't care, Mr. Jensen muttered. She's reevaluating everything. I set my wine glass down and dabbed the corner of my mouth with a napkin. It's actually at 8 a.m., I said. My voice calm but unmistakably clear. And Lauren won't need her reports. I've already reviewed them. A sudden hush fell across the table, like someone had pulled the plug on the entire room's sound system. Lauren let out a nervous laugh. What are you talking about? I met her eyes. You won't need your reports, she scoffed. You don't even work at Summit. I stood slowly, smoothing my sweater as I pushed my chair back. I don't work at Summit, I said. I am. Summit, gasps echoed. A knife slipped from someone's hand. Mr. Jensen's wine glass trembled in his fingers. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. Dad just stared. Lauren's face was frozen in a half smile, trying to decode what she'd just heard. Mr. Jensen blinked. You're Rachel Lee, I nodded. Or, as your emails have addressed me all month, Mrs. CEO. The silence that followed was pure, unfiltered awe and horror. A slow rolling wave of realization moved across the table like a tide, swallowing a beach. Lauren's smile cracked. This is some kind of joke, she said, voice rising. You teach community college. I teach one class a semester, I replied evenly. Because I believe in accessible education. The rest of my time, I run one of the largest private investment firms on the East Coast. My mother's eyes widened. You said you were renting a small apartment downtown. I do. I said I own the building. My father finally spoke, the Prius. Better for the environment, I replied. Unlike Lauren's Range Rover, which by the way she charged to the company card. Mr. Jensen turned slowly toward Lauren. You did what Lauren's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I turned to my mother. Remember last Thanksgiving when you asked me if I was ever going to do something real with my life? At the time I was finalizing a $12 billion acquisition, I signed the deal from your guest bathroom, in case you were wondering. The color drained from her face. I looked around the table at the stunned faces of people who had spent years talking over me, past me, through me. All these years I said I let you believe what you wanted. That I was struggling, that I was lesser. I never corrected you because I didn't need your validation. I was too busy building something you couldn't even imagine. Lauren finally found her voice. You let me humiliate you. You let me put you in the garage. Yes, I said quietly. You did. Mr. Jensen looked physically ill. You're the one who approved the Wilson deal, the Richardson takeover. All of it, I confirmed. And I reviewed your last quarter's department reports. Mr. Jensen, we'll be discussing the $3 million discrepancy you didn't catch tomorrow morning. The room stayed silent. I picked up my napkin, folded it neatly beside my untouched dessert, and stepped away from the table, behind me. Silverware scraped wine sloshed, and the hum of dinner conversation crumbled into stunned silence. I didn't need to yell. The truth had already done the shouting. I reviewed Lauren's restructuring plan. I said my voice even. It cost us $3 million in operational losses, possibly more. The stem of Mom's wine glass slipped through her fingers and shattered against the tiled floor. Red wine bloomed across the white linen tablecloth like a spreading bruise. No one moved to clean it. Lauren sat frozen lips, parted eyes wide and glassy. You said I lived in a tiny apartment, I continued. I owned the building, you mocked my Prius, while I quietly funded climate research across 3 continents. You put me in the garage, while I paid the salaries of every person in your department. Mr. Jensen looked like he was trying to disappear into his seat. I watched for years as you all made assumptions. You measured worth by handbags, by cars, by who sat closest to the head of the table. You gave Lauren your pride and applause, while treating me like an afterthought. I looked around the table, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them squirm. I wasn't quiet because I was ashamed. I was quiet because I didn't need your permission to matter. Lauren finally spoke, barely a whisper. Are you going to fire me? No, I said, picking up my bag. I'm going to hold you accountable, just like anyone else. I paused at the door, turning one last time to face the room of stunned faces. Success isn't about titles. It's about impact and character, both of which, Lauren, are now under review. I walked back through the hallway alone, the muffled whispers of disbelief trailing behind me like a weak echo. The same hallway where family photos lined the walls, Lauren front and center in most of them, her smile wide and hungry for approval. Mine were always off to the side. If there at all, I stepped into the cold garage, the heater still humming faintly, a weak attempt at comfort. The cot sat exactly where I left it, beside a bin, labeled Holiday Lights. Broken. A perfect metaphor. I reached for my bag, but before I opened the door again, I paused. The voices inside had grown louder, chairs scraping, questions being asked in frantic tones. Mr. Jensen's voice rattled, defensive. My mother's trying to recover some version of grace. Lauren's quiet, now clipped and confused. I stepped back into the threshold, met with a sudden hush. Oh, one more thing, I said calmly. Looking over my shoulder, I won't be sleeping in the garage tonight. I let that hang a moment. I'll be at my suite at the Four Seasons. Mom's brows knitted, already forming the question, which I added I own. I smiled. Merry Christmas, and then I turned, walking into the night as snow began to fall again. Soft and clean and unbothered. I got into my Prius, started the engine and drove away without looking back. My phone buzzed, texts from Lauren, Mom, even Dad. Apologies, explanations, excuses, wearing the mask of affection. I didn't open a single one. Some things don't deserve a response. As the streetlights blurred past the windows, I turned up the heat and allowed myself one long, quiet breath. Let them sleep in the cold for once. I had earned the warmth. The next morning, the world outside the city was hushed under a blanket of snow. But inside Summit's glass tower, everything was sharp and clear. I sat at the head of the boardroom table, sunlight pouring in behind me, turning the polished surface into a mirror. My reflection looked calm, composed, exactly where I belonged. The double doors opened. Lauren walked in first, shoulders tight. Her usual bounce, replaced by quiet steps. Mr. Jensen followed, his tie, perfectly centered this time. Hands clasped nervously in front of him. Neither of them looked up right away. I didn't offer a greeting. I waited until everyone was seated, then opened the meeting. Before we begin, I said, scanning the faces around the table, let's talk about leadership. Chairs shifted. Leadership, I continued, isn't about titles or corner offices. It's about responsibility, about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. Because someone always is. Silence settled again. Not uncomfortable, just heavy enough to be remembered. I glanced down the table Lauren was writing. Not doodling, not pretending, taking notes. She still wouldn't meet my eyes, but she was listening. Maybe for the first time, I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands together, and smiled. Not out of revenge, not even satisfaction, but clarity. This was never about proving them wrong. It was about showing them I was never beneath them to begin with. I had simply built my own table and invited them in.